My wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But instead, it became the moment that shattered my self-esteem into a million pieces. Standing there in my size 24 wedding dress, I felt like I was drowning in white fabric that seemed to mock every curve of my 280-pound body. The dress had cost me 3 months of savings, and even then, I had to settle for something that barely fit because most bridal shops in downtown Chicago didn't carry my size. I remember staring at myself in the mirror that morning, trying to convince myself that I looked beautiful. But deep down, I knew I was just fooling myself. The woman looking back at me was someone I barely recognized, someone who had let food become her comfort, her escape, and ultimately, her prison. The ceremony took place at a beautiful venue in Lincoln Park, surrounded by towering oak trees and perfectly manicured gardens that made everything look like a fairy tale. My husband-to-be, Michael, stood at the altar with tears in his eyes, and for a moment, I believed that maybe, just maybe, this day would be perfect, despite my insecurities. Our families had traveled from all over Illinois and neighboring states to witness our union, and I could see the genuine happiness in their faces as I walked down the aisle. The photographer was capturing every moment, and I tried to smile naturally, even though I felt like every camera flash was highlighting my flaws. The music was perfect, the flowers were stunning, and everything seemed to be going according to plan until the reception began. It was during the cocktail hour when I first heard the whispers, those cruel words that would haunt me for years to come. I was standing near the appetizer table, trying to decide whether I should eat something or skip it entirely to avoid judgment, when I overheard my husband's cousin talking to her friends near the bar. She was pointing in my direction and laughing, her voice carrying just enough for me to catch the words that would change everything. The phrase, "white elephant," hit me like a physical blow, and I felt my cheeks burn with shame as I realized she was talking about me, about how I looked in my wedding dress. Her friends giggled along, and I watched as they continued their conversation, completely unaware that the bride, the target of their cruel joke, was standing just a few feet away, dying inside. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and pretended happiness, but those words echoed in my mind with every step I took across the dance floor. I tried to focus on Michael's loving gaze, on the beautiful speeches from our parents, and on the joy of finally being married to the man of my dreams. But the damage was done. Every time someone took a photo, I wondered if they were thinking the same thing as his cousin, that I was too big, too much, too embarrassing to be the center of attention. The wedding cake cutting became an exercise in self-consciousness, as I worried that people were judging every bite I took, every smile I forced, every moment I tried to enjoy what should have been the most special day of my life. I found myself retreating to the bathroom multiple times throughout the night, not because I needed to use it, but because I needed a moment to breathe, to cry, and to try to rebuild the confidence that had been so brutally torn down. That night, as I lay in bed next to my new husband in our honeymoon suite, I made a silent promise to myself that would take me years to fulfill. The woman who had called me a white elephant had no idea that her words would become the catalyst for the most dramatic transformation of my life. A journey that would take me from 280 pounds of shame and self-doubt to a place of strength and confidence I never thought possible. I didn't know it then, but that cruel comment would eventually become the fuel for my fire, the motivation that would drive me to prove not just to her, but to myself, that I was capable of becoming someone completely different. The white elephant was about to disappear forever, and in her place would emerge a woman who would make everyone who had ever doubted her take notice. The weeks following my wedding were a constant reminder of that devastating night, as every congratulatory message and wedding photo shared on social media felt like salt in an open wound. I found myself obsessively scrolling through Facebook and Instagram, analyzing every picture from different angles, trying to see myself through the eyes of others, and always coming to the same painful conclusion. The professional wedding photos arrived 3 weeks later, and while Michael was thrilled to see our special day captured so beautifully, I could barely look at them without feeling that familiar wave of shame wash over me. Each image seemed to confirm what his cousin had said. There I was, the white elephant in the room, taking up too much space in what should have been elegant, timeless photographs. I started avoiding social gatherings altogether, declining invitations to birthday parties, work events, and even family dinners, because the thought of being photographed or judged again was simply too overwhelming to bear. My relationship with food, which had always been complicated, became even more destructive in the aftermath of that humiliating experience. I would wake up each morning with good intentions, planning healthy meals and promising myself that today would be different. But by evening, I would find myself standing in front of the refrigerator, eating directly from containers while tears streamed down my face. The local McDonald's on Roosevelt Road became my secret refuge, where I would order large meals through the drive-thru and eat them in my car in empty parking lots, feeling both satisfied and disgusted with myself simultaneously. Michael tried to be supportive, suggesting we cook healthy meals together or go for walks around our neighborhood in Oak Park, but I was too ashamed to admit how deep my pain ran and how completely out of control I felt. Food had become my enemy and my only comfort, a vicious cycle that seemed impossible to break no matter how desperately I wanted to change. Work became my only escape from the constant self-loathing that had taken over my life. But even there, I felt like I was living behind a mask of false confidence. I worked as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized company in downtown Chicago, and while I was good at my job, I constantly worried that my colleagues were judging my appearance rather than focusing on my professional contributions. Lunch meetings were torture, as I would carefully select the healthiest option on the menu, while secretly craving everything else, all while maintaining conversations about quarterly reports and upcoming campaigns. The office bathroom mirror became my worst enemy, reflecting back an image that seemed to grow larger and more distorted with each passing day. I started wearing exclusively black clothing, thinking it would somehow make me invisible, or at least less noticeable, but nothing could hide the shame I carried with me everywhere I went. The turning point came 6 months after my wedding, during what should have been a routine doctor's appointment for my annual physical. Dr. Martinez, my physician since college, had always been gentle about discussing my weight, but this time her expression was more serious than usual as she reviewed my test results. My blood pressure had reached dangerous levels. My cholesterol was through the roof, and she mentioned words like pre-diabetic and cardiovascular risk that made my heart race with fear rather than just exertion. She explained that at 28 years old, I was facing health complications that typically didn't appear until much later in life, and that my current trajectory was leading me toward serious medical problems that could affect my ability to have children or even live a normal lifespan. The reality check was brutal but necessary. I wasn't just carrying extra weight. I was carrying a death sentence that I had created one meal, one binge, one moment of emotional eating at a time. That night, I sat in my car outside the medical building for over an hour, staring at the pamphlets Dr. Martinez had given me about nutrition counseling and weight management programs. For the first time since my wedding day, I felt something other than shame and self-pity. I felt a tiny spark of determination flickering in the darkness that had consumed my life for months. The white elephant comment still echoed in my mind, but now it was competing with something else. The possibility that I could prove everyone wrong, including myself. The decision to finally take control of my life didn't happen overnight, but rather through a series of small, terrifying steps that began with throwing away every piece of junk food in my kitchen. I remember standing in my Oak Park apartment at 2 a.m., methodically going through every cabinet, drawer, and hiding spot where I had stashed cookies, chips, and candy bars like some kind of food addict preparing for the apocalypse. The garbage bag grew heavier with each item I tossed, and with it, I felt a strange mixture of relief and panic. Relief that the temptation would be gone, but panic about how I would cope with stress and emotions without my usual comfort foods. Michael watched from the doorway, offering quiet support, but wisely staying out of my way as I purged our home of everything that had been enabling my destructive relationship with food. By dawn, our kitchen looked completely different, sparse and clean, like a blank canvas waiting for me to paint a new version of my life. Finding the right support system proved to be more challenging than I had anticipated. as I quickly discovered that not all weight loss programs were created equal. I spent weeks researching different approaches, from expensive commercial programs that promised quick fixes to online communities that seemed more focused on selling supplements than providing real guidance. The local Weight Watchers meeting in downtown Chicago felt too public and intimidating, filled with people who seemed to have their lives more together than I did, while the gym memberships I looked into made me feel like I would be on display for everyone to judge. Eventually, I found a small nutritionist's office in Lincoln Park run by Dr. Rebecca Chen, a woman who specialized in emotional eating and had struggled with her own weight issues earlier in life. Her approach was different from anything I had encountered before. Instead of focusing solely on calories and exercise, she wanted to understand the psychological triggers that had led me to use food as a coping mechanism for so many years. The first month of my transformation was brutal in ways I hadn't expected, as my body and mind rebelled against every healthy choice I tried to make. Simple tasks like grocery shopping became overwhelming experiences. As I found myself standing in the produce section feeling completely lost and intimidated by vegetables I had never cooked before. My energy levels plummeted initially, and I experienced headaches, mood swings, and cravings so intense that I would sometimes sit in my car outside fast food restaurants, gripping the steering wheel and fighting the urge to give up on everything. Sleep became elusive as my body adjusted to eating regular, smaller meals instead of the chaotic binge and starve cycle I had maintained for years. There were nights when I would lie awake thinking about the cousin's cruel words, using them as motivation when my willpower felt weakest, reminding myself that I was doing this not just for my health, but to prove that I was stronger than anyone had ever given me credit for. The scale became both my best friend and my worst enemy during those early weeks, as I obsessively weighed myself every morning, hoping to see dramatic changes that simply weren't happening fast enough for my impatient mind. Dr. Chen had warned me that sustainable weight loss would be slow and steady, but after years of yo-yo dieting and quick fixes, I struggled to accept that real transformation would take time and consistency rather than dramatic gestures. Some days the number would go down, filling me with hope and determination, while other days it would stay the same, or even increase slightly, sending me into spirals of self-doubt and frustration that threatened to derail all my progress. 3 months into my journey, something remarkable began to happen that I hadn't anticipated. I started to discover a strength within myself that had been buried under years of self-doubt and emotional eating. The morning walks around my Oak Park neighborhood, which had initially felt like torture, gradually became the highlight of my day as I found peace in the rhythm of my footsteps and the changing seasons around me. I began to notice things I had never paid attention to before. The way the sunrise painted the Chicago skyline in shades of pink and gold, the friendly nods from other early morning walkers, and most importantly, the growing sense that my body was capable of more than I had ever believed possible. My endurance improved week by week, and what started as a painful 15-minute shuffle around the block evolved into confident 45-minute power walks that left me energized rather than exhausted. The physical changes were still subtle, but the mental transformation was becoming undeniable as I began to see exercise not as punishment for my past choices, but as a celebration of what my body could achieve. The kitchen, once my battlefield of shame and secret binges, slowly transformed into a place of creativity and nourishment as I learned to cook healthy meals that actually tasted good. Dr. Chen had recommended several cookbooks focused on nutritious comfort foods, and I threw myself into learning new techniques with the same intensity I had once reserved for finding the perfect hiding spots for junk food. Meal prep became my Sunday ritual, as I would spend hours chopping vegetables, preparing lean proteins, and portioning out balanced meals for the week ahead. Michael was amazed by my newfound culinary skills, and our dinner conversation shifted from discussions about my latest diet struggles to excited planning of new recipes we wanted to try together. The act of nourishing my body with wholesome foods began to feel like an act of self-love rather than deprivation, and I started to understand that true satisfaction came not from the quantity of food I consumed, but from the quality and intention behind each meal. By month 4, the physical changes were becoming noticeable enough that colleagues at work began commenting on my appearance. though I still struggled to accept their compliments as genuine rather than polite observations. My clothes were fitting differently, requiring me to invest in a few new pieces that actually flattered my changing shape instead of hiding it under layers of black fabric. The number on the scale had dropped by 35 pounds. But more importantly, my blood pressure had normalized, and Dr. Martinez was thrilled with my improved lab results during my follow-up appointment. Sleep came easier now, and I woke up feeling rested and optimistic rather than dreading another day of battling my own reflection in the mirror. The constant mental chatter about food and weight that had dominated my thoughts for years was gradually being replaced by other interests and goals, as I rediscovered parts of my personality that had been overshadowed by my obsession with my appearance. The real test came when Michael's family announced their annual reunion in Milwaukee, the first large gathering I would attend since my wedding day disaster. The thought of seeing his cousin again filled me with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation, as part of me wanted to prove how much I had changed, while another part feared that I still wasn't enough. I spent weeks preparing mentally for the event, practicing confident postures in the mirror and reminding myself that my worth wasn't determined by anyone else's opinion of my appearance. The family reunion in Milwaukee arrived faster than I had anticipated, and despite months of preparation, I found myself standing in front of my bedroom mirror, feeling like that insecure bride all over again. However, this time was different. The woman looking back at me had lost 60 pounds and gained something far more valuable: a sense of self-worth that wasn't entirely dependent on the number on a scale. I had chosen a beautiful navy blue dress that actually fit my body properly, accentuating the curves I was learning to appreciate rather than hide. And for the first time in years, I felt genuinely excited about being photographed. The drive to Milwaukee gave me time to reflect on how far I had come, not just physically but emotionally, as I realized that the cousin's cruel words had inadvertently become the catalyst for the most transformative period of my life. Michael squeezed my hand as we pulled into the hotel parking lot, reminding me that regardless of anyone else's reaction, he was proud of the woman I had become and the strength I had shown throughout this journey. Walking into the reunion venue felt like entering a parallel universe where I was the same person, but completely different at the same time. Family members who hadn't seen me since the wedding did double takes, their faces showing genuine surprise and admiration as they processed my transformation. The cousin who had made the white elephant comment was there, of course, and I watched as her expression shifted from casual indifference to obvious shock when she realized who I was. Instead of the crushing shame I had expected to feel upon seeing her again, I experienced something unexpected, a calm confidence that came from knowing I had proven to myself that I was capable of incredible change. She approached me later in the evening with what seemed like genuine compliments about my appearance, but I found myself more interested in talking about my new cooking hobby and the half marathon I was training for than dwelling on her previous cruelty. The conversation was pleasant, but brief, and I realized that her opinion of me, positive or negative, no longer held the power to define my self-worth. The most surprising moment of the evening came when I noticed several family members asking to take photos with me, something that would have terrified me just a year earlier. I found myself posing confidently, smiling genuinely, and actually enjoying the process of capturing memories rather than dreading how I would look in the pictures. The photographer at the event, a professional hired for the reunion, even asked if he could take some individual shots of me, because he said I had such a radiant energy that would translate beautifully on camera. Later that night, as I scrolled through the photos on my phone, I barely recognized the confident, glowing woman in the images as the same person who had hidden from cameras for so many years. Michael was amazed by the transformation he witnessed that evening, not just in my appearance but in my entire demeanor, the way I carried myself, engaged in conversations, and genuinely enjoyed being the center of positive attention. The drive home from Milwaukee was filled with a sense of closure and anticipation that I hadn't expected. I had faced my demons, proven my strength, and discovered that the opinion that had once devastated me was now completely irrelevant to my happiness. More importantly, I realized that my journey was far from over. This reunion had simply been one milestone in a much larger transformation that was reshaping every aspect of my life. The months following the Milwaukee reunion marked a turning point in my transformation that went far beyond physical appearance, as I began to embrace opportunities and challenges that the old version of myself would never have considered. My confidence had grown to the point where I decided to start sharing my journey on social media, something that would have been unthinkable during my darkest days when I avoided cameras at all costs. I created an Instagram account dedicated to documenting my healthy lifestyle, posting photos of my meal prep sessions, workout achievements, and motivational quotes that had helped me through difficult moments. The response was overwhelming and immediate. Women from all over the country began following my account, sharing their own struggles with weight and self-esteem, and thanking me for being brave enough to show that transformation was possible. What started as a personal documentation project quickly evolved into a supportive community of women who were all fighting similar battles, and I found myself becoming an unexpected source of inspiration for others who felt trapped in their own bodies. The professional opportunities that emerged from my newfound confidence were equally surprising and rewarding. My marketing skills, combined with my authentic personal story, caught the attention of several health and wellness brands who wanted to collaborate with someone who genuinely understood the struggles their customers faced. I began working as a brand ambassador for a meal delivery service that specialized in nutritious, portion-controlled meals, and the partnership felt natural because I was already using and loving their products. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same social media platforms where I had once hidden from photos were now showcasing my transformation and helping me build a career around inspiring others. My employer noticed the positive changes in my confidence and communication skills, leading to a promotion that came with increased responsibilities and the opportunity to lead a team of younger marketers who looked up to me as a mentor and role model. By month 8 of my journey, I had lost 85 pounds and gained something even more valuable, a completely different relationship with my body and food that felt sustainable rather than restrictive. The half marathon I had been training for was just 2 weeks away, and the woman who once couldn't walk around the block without getting winded was now running 6 miles at a time with ease and enjoyment. My Instagram following had grown to over 15,000 people, and the messages I received daily from women thanking me for sharing my story reminded me that my transformation had become about so much more than proving a point to one cruel family member. I had become living proof that it was possible to completely reinvent yourself, not through quick fixes or extreme measures, but through consistent daily choices and an unwavering commitment to becoming the best version of yourself. The local running store in Oak Park had even asked me to speak at their weekly group runs about overcoming mental barriers to fitness, and I found myself genuinely excited about public speaking opportunities that would have terrified me just months earlier. The most satisfying moment came when I noticed that Michael's cousin had not only followed my Instagram account, but was regularly liking and commenting on my posts with encouraging messages and heart emojis. The woman who had once called me a white elephant was now one of my most consistent supporters online, though I doubted she realized the connection between her cruel wedding comment and my dramatic transformation. The morning of my half-marathon dawned crisp and clear, with the Chicago skyline gleaming in the distance as thousands of runners gathered at Grant Park for what would become one of the most emotionally significant days of my life. Standing at the starting line, wearing my bright pink running gear and surrounded by athletes of all shapes and sizes, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this moment. Just 18 months earlier, I had been the woman hiding in bathroom stalls at my own wedding, and now I was about to run 13.1 miles through the streets of my beloved city alongside some of the most dedicated and inspiring people I had ever encountered. My Instagram followers had been cheering me on for weeks, sharing their own running stories and sending messages of encouragement that filled my phone with notifications of support from women across the country who saw my race as a symbol of their own potential for transformation. Michael was positioned at mile 8 with a homemade sign that read, "My wife is my hero." And knowing he would be there waiting gave me an extra boost of determination as the starting gun fired, and we began moving forward as one massive, powerful wave of human determination. The first few miles flew by in a blur of adrenaline and excitement, as I settled into the steady rhythm that had become second nature during months of training runs through Oak Park and along the lakefront trail. My body felt strong and capable, moving with a grace and efficiency that still amazed me every time I laced up my running shoes and headed out the door. The crowds lining the streets were incredible, holding signs, ringing cowbells, and shouting encouragement to complete strangers who were pushing their bodies to achieve something extraordinary. Around mile 5, I passed a group of women who recognized me from my Instagram account and started chanting my name, which brought tears to my eyes and reminded me that my story had somehow become bigger than just my own personal victory. The energy from the spectators was infectious, but the real power came from within, from the knowledge that every step I was taking was proof that I had completely rewritten the story of what was possible for my life. Mile 10 brought the familiar wall that every distance runner knows, where your body starts questioning your sanity and your mind begins negotiating for reasons to stop. But I had prepared for this moment both physically and mentally. Instead of focusing on the discomfort in my legs or the burning in my lungs, I thought about all the women who were following my journey and drawing strength from my example. And I thought about the version of myself who had once believed that athletic achievement was reserved for other people. The cousin's cruel words echoed in my mind one final time, not as a source of pain, but as a reminder of how far I had traveled from that broken, ashamed woman to this strong, confident athlete who was about to cross a finish line that had once seemed impossible. My pace actually quickened during those final miles, fueled by a combination of physical training and emotional determination that made me feel like I could run forever if necessary. Crossing the finish line was a moment of pure euphoria that no amount of social media likes or compliments could have prepared me for, as I realized that I had just accomplished something that proved beyond any doubt that I was capable of absolutely anything I set my mind to achieve. 2 years after crossing that half-marathon finish line, I find myself living a life that feels like it belongs to someone else entirely. Someone confident, healthy, and genuinely happy in ways I never thought possible during those dark months following my wedding. My Instagram account has grown to over 50,000 followers, and what started as a personal documentation of my weight loss journey has evolved into a thriving business where I help other women transform their relationships with food, exercise, and self-worth. The irony of building a career around the very platforms where I once hid from the world isn't lost on me, but it serves as a daily reminder that our greatest pain can become our most powerful purpose when we're brave enough to share our stories authentically. I've written an ebook about emotional eating, launched an online coaching program, and even been invited to speak at wellness conferences across the Midwest, sharing the stage with nutritionists and fitness experts who once seemed like they lived in a completely different universe from mine. The woman who once couldn't bear to be photographed now poses confidently for professional headshots and promotional materials, genuinely enjoying the process of capturing images that inspire others to believe in their own potential for transformation. Michael and I recently celebrated our 3rd wedding anniversary with a vow renewal ceremony in the same Lincoln Park venue where our original wedding took place. But this time the experience was completely different. I wore a stunning size 8 dress that hugged my 145-pound frame perfectly, and every photo from that day radiates the joy and confidence that had been missing from our first wedding pictures. The guest list was smaller and more intimate, filled with people who had supported my journey and celebrated every milestone along the way, including several women I had met through my online community who had become genuine friends. Dr. Chen was there, beaming with pride as she watched her former patient dance the night away with energy and grace that would have been impossible at my original weight. Most surprisingly, Michael's cousin attended the celebration and spent much of the evening telling other guests about how inspiring my transformation had been, completely unaware that her cruel comment had been the catalyst for everything that followed. Watching her enthusiastically share my before and after photos with relatives while praising my dedication and strength was perhaps the most satisfying moment of vindication I could have imagined. The numbers tell part of my story: 135 pounds lost, blood pressure normalized, cholesterol levels perfect, and a resting heart rate that would make athletes jealous. But the real transformation goes so much deeper than anything a scale could measure. I wake up every morning excited about the day ahead, grateful for a body that can run, lift, dance, and accomplish things I never dreamed possible when I was trapped in a cycle of shame and self-destruction. My relationship with food is healthy and intuitive now, based on nourishment and enjoyment rather than punishment and emotional numbing. The white elephant comment that once shattered my self-esteem has become a badge of honor. Proof that we can transform our deepest wounds into our greatest strengths when we refuse to let other people's cruelty define our worth. Every like, comment, and message I receive from women who are beginning their own transformation journeys reminds me that sharing our struggles and victories can create ripples of change that extend far beyond our own lives, turning our personal healing into a source of hope for countless others who are still searching for the courage to begin.